Youth Rugby Discussion. We're a collection of current and past coaches, parents, administrators. Every episode, we get together to banter, discuss around issues relevant to youth rugby. And along the way, we've had some great guests that have helped bring a lot to the party. So please, join us. Help grow the sport of youth rugby by just being part of our community. And there we are. We are live. So what we're going to talk about today is who we work with. And as we jump into it, we will define what exactly that means. But before we do that, we're going to go down the line so you guys get a chance to hear and associate a name with a voice. So, Alan, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi, this is Coach Alan with the Barbarians.
I'm Brad Nathan. I'm with the Centaurs.
I'm Chris. I'm a rugby dad.
Daniel, I'm with the Barbarians.
Jeff Karras, I'm with Rugby Rhode Island, a rugby dad, a coach, and also administrator.
Hi, I am Jennifer. I am a youth coach for the South Shore Sharks, and I am the Myro Girls Developmental Chair. We're trying to get more girls in the game.
I'm Kate, and I'm the coach at Belmont High School Rugby.
I'm Shaggy, coach and president of South Shore Sharks.
Oh, fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And basically, what do we mean when we say who we work with? I think we're going to identify the different entities that we need to make sure that we are copacetic with, that we're playing nice with, in order to either stand up a new club, whether it's going to be a high school club, a club associated with a school, or a community-based club, or these entities that we need to sort of continue to play nice with and build a relationship in order to be able to flourish, right? So anybody want to kick us off with what focus in an entity and sort of best practices, or what kind of experience we have had?
I wonder if it might make sense to maybe start with like the community teams in some direction, because that applies to youth and high school level in the same way.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to clarify and say, like maybe how to get fields and how to work.
Why don't we go
towns,
down the list of coaches and just say who we are, who we are, where we're at, and who we have worked with, and what we currently have. That sound okay or not?
Sure, Brad. Do you
Yeah.
want to start? I mean, Alan's
sure.
above you, but why don't you start
Yeah.
and give us what you're thinking?
Sure. So, if you guys don't know me, I'm Brad. I'm with the Centaurs, and I'm a full-time sports coach. Basically, we are in Hopkinton. We are now in Sharon, and we are working with Mount Ida up there with the UMass facility. We're currently working with the Hopkinton Rec Department, the Sharon Rec Department. We are working with Mount Ida. We are working with the Board of Health through this coronavirus fiasco. We're working with some of field owners themselves. So, for instance, in Hopkinton, we actually have our own field. So that's one way of getting one. Talking with various people, also going through the lines of how to present those programs throughout, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't mean to jump the gun here, but I wonder if it's worth saying like that sounds like a lot of parks and rec departments that you guys are managing a relationship with, and I'm sure a couple of people on the call have also had some relationships with parks and rec departments, and I'm wondering, like, who do you talk to? How do you start that conversation with the parks and rec department when you want to start a community-based program and acquire access to fields?
I don't think there's a single decoder ring. I mean, certainly our experience with the Barbarians, and I think we talked about this a few times before. We were playing pickup games on rec grounds, and the rec approached us and asked whether we wanted to become a little more formal, affiliate ourselves with them, and start working directly with them. In other capacities, we've been approached by rec departments to ask, how can we set up a rugby club? How do we get started? So, straight away in 2 neighboring towns, we're seeing very different approaches to how rugby gets started. Though as you get past that first hurdle, the commonality gets a lot stronger. Apologies, Shaggy. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree with you. I mean, the trick is really just getting out there in the public and showing what youth rugby can do, whatever level we have it at, and that opens the possibilities and opens those networks up that we just we just have to take advantage of, because they do present themselves. For the older kids, it's harder because you have more liability. There's more, there's more people. There's more assumed risk with the sport. So the establishment is just they're a little more wary. But with the kids, it's great. I as soon as I brought my club into Marshfield, I just made sure we're in the most visible fields, and made sure we made the most noise with the rec department, and then the offers start coming. I start putting the kids at the a practice here at the Boys and Girls Club, practice there at the YMCA, and then the opportunities kind of present themselves. Like now, there's a program going on at the YMCA with a bunch of my rugby kids. That's it's simply there because they needed a program and they needed kids. So it's like, okay, why not rugby kids? Why not a rugby program? Because we're established in the community. So yeah, that first hurdle is really the biggest, and then being out there and being a positive force for the community is its own. That's its own best advertisement, really.
I think she's looking for an answer of who you actually connect with, though.
Oh no, I'm not. Those are great.
Okay.
I'm more looking for because what's interesting about that to me is that means you guys are talking about essentially showing up to both of you, both Alan and Shaggy, are saying start with the practice, don't worry about the permits, and that's so not how I would have thought about it, and that's awesome. That kind of makes people want you to be involved in their.
So I think it's I wonder if there's another angle there that maybe, Kate, you're more influenced or has more impact on you, maybe, is that both Shaggy and I are fortunate to live out in pseudo rural suburbia, and grass is pretty common around us, and so showing up and using grass fields is not using a scarce commodity. It's something that's fairly readily available. What we noted was that we went from fairly scrubby grass fields, which were whilst maintained, not heavily maintained, to being able to use better quality, but not necessarily the expensive pristine fields used for the more popular sports. So I think the pseudo rural suburban environment really enables us just to be part of it. And the common message I've got from all the the couple of rec departments I've spoken to is they're just so focused on getting the kids in their community out and playing and getting some exercise and getting some fresh air, that anything which is properly organized by sensible people and is safe, that they're enthused to support.
And I'm hearing something there that I'm pretty that I'm finding very interesting. So I think one thing that is clear is one entity, one institution that you want to engage with if you're looking to start a club, or something that we've seen successful, is tying in with a rec department for a town, and how you tie in, whether they come to you, whether you go to them, whether it takes a long time of knocking down walls and hurdles, or you're just welcomed directly in. That's we'll probably hear, and we have heard different stories of people that approach it a different way. The one thing that I want to hear actually is if the athletic department is so important, what are some of the commonalities? Now we heard that it might be very different approaches in different towns, but what are the commonalities that we know of for how you want to, like, what are they interested? What do they want to hear? What do they not want to hear? How you should present. Now, again, we should probably present yourself in a fairly, articulate, eloquent, if you can, if not professional. But what sets you up for success? What do we think sets us up for success when we approach a rec club? So who has experience with rec clubs, and who can tell us what are the key things, maybe the lingo, what are the things that they really want to hear, really want to know about? And Alan, I think you kind of kicked it off and you said they want their kids to get out there and be active. So check. We're saying, hey, we want to. We're offering an activity that should engage children. Are the other key things you definitely want to say or you want to do when approaching a rec department?
I think my first observation was so taking from two different angles. One where we were forming a club and the rec department came and said, "Hey, feel free, come and use our grass." That was fairly straightforward. We were organized. We were a bunch of knowledgeable, aware of the sport. We were trying to get started adults who had kids who wanted to play. So we started with the nucleus. The other town that I most recently started talking to has come from a completely different perspective. They've had a very limited exposure driven by Daryl when he was here in Massachusetts. And that was so popular and they were so enthused, they decided they want to do more with it. But they have no coaches, no experience as far as they're concerned. This oversized football is causing them some confusion. How do we use this thing? And so they were looking for a lot more help to get started.
Mm-hmm.
But the common message, the bits that you were just asked about now, Daniel, was that in all situations, it was about getting kids out playing, doing something, learning some skills, but more importantly, getting out and getting some exercise. And obviously, at this moment during the pandemic, most of us don't get to do too much of anything other than sit around and bemoan the fact we can't go out and do something else. They're very keen to make sure there's some activities readily available and a broad spectrum. So the bit that was interesting to me, having sensed some competition between the sports in other areas, talking to the rec departments, there's no competition. It seemed, I almost got the impression that they would happily have a sport for every single kid if they could work out how to schedule it and make it all work.
Yeah.
And so it's about getting out there, getting healthy and doing stuff. And again, having them provide the fields, but not necessarily lean on them to do anything else while they get started and get going. We have to provide the coaches, we have to provide the instruction and the insights and the equipment.
So, Alan, I have a question for you, if you mind me asking real quick.
Sure.
So you said there was another location that Daryl worked with before he left for Colorado, and I'm just noticing that I have you from the Barbarians and I have Daniel here from the Barbarians, same organization. What's maybe holding Barbarians back, or maybe being wary? I could be wrong. I'm just asking that maybe one of you guys that is established, knows how to run it, goes over there and then gets a couple of parents and gets them up to speed. That way there's two locations for the overall purpose of getting kids to play.
I don't know that it's something that's, the Barbarians are. I don't know that it's something that we're kind of holding ourselves back from. I think if we had our druthers, it would be a completely new club right next door to us that we could go work with and support them and and play as and when they're available. We've already talked about the first ramp up. Daniel and I were, two of the people who volunteered to go help them get started in that respect. But I mean, it's club loyalty, to some extent, as much as the chance to grow extra rugby. So I think there's no inertia against it. There's no inertia for it. But it's if we can get another club started, that is fantastic. What we need to do, we'll work that out as we go. Whether it involves, myself or Daniel deserting the Barbarians, one hopes not. I hope you're listening, Mr. Cares. No stealing our coaches. But joking aside, you're absolutely right, Brad. It's about getting kids playing rugby, and whatever we need to do that makes sense and is and has a good outcome. I think we'll all be focused on trying to get that done.
Well, I guess my real question then is, though, I understand the whole loyalty thing, and it's a big thing in clubs and organizations, you can be Barbarians in Rentham and Barbarians wherever the other location is. You can still be under the same umbrella. There's
Yeah,
no
that's
there's no
yes,
going away
and
from loyalty.
there's
I mean,
only
if I'm in,
I'm only aware of one club in youth rugby doing that, which is the Wolfhounds. They have their north and their south team for the sevens.
yeah, no, yeah. So I get that. So I know, like when Navesh left, I discussed with him with things that we would like to do to get kids playing more is to work on these different locations. So the past, I would say, month and a half to 2 months uh, of time, I've been reaching out. So if I have one in Hopkinton, I now have one in Sherborne. Then I might have one at Mount Ida. So for instance, I'll do, I don't know, I'm just giving an example. Hopkinton on Saturday, and then on Sunday I'll do Sherborne or something like that, and then I'll arrange the hours that coordinate with that. So you're not really cross-referencing; you're trying to manage it. But I know you also mentioned that once you get established, you got to figure out the quirks as you go along. So we're trying to do that too.
Hey Brad, so it's kind
Yeah.
of bringing it back to the topic of working with what are the entities that we're working with, and rec departments being one of them. Does that mean that you have had to engage with a couple of different rec departments, so one per each town that you're sort of involved in?
Yeah. So basically, how the soccer club I work with, along with the wrestling club I used to own, is you're under one organization. So, for instance, let's just say Barbarians, as an example. You'll have your own website, which you guys have. You can do registrations through there. And then once you make the connections with the rec departments of each person or town, whatever, they all follow it. They'll trace it back to you. So that way you'll get registrations through town A, registrations through town B, and then people who might search you through Google or whatever might register and pick a selection through your own website. That
So
way you're growing audiences in 3 different areas.
right, okay, but you're tying directly through the rec department of those different towns, is what I'm hearing.
Yes and no. Only because one field we own, one field we don't. So, for instance, I'm trying to explain it. Just like yes
Oh, no,
and
that's
no.
fine. No, I don't necessarily want to know specifically about your club. I do, but I think right now I want to hear specifically about the rec departments that you've had to talk to. If you've had to, if you've tied in through a rec department, what did
Yep.
you do? What did you do to get them on
Oh,
board? And
oh,
what are like
sure.
what are like the key words? What are the key phrases? What are the key things that you brought? Did they want to
Oh,
see a whole plan? Did they want to see insurance? Did they want to see 5, 6 people there?
oh, sure.
What does the
Yeah.
rec department want to say? Yes, we like you. Yes, we're going to let you. We're going to help you. Thrive.
Oh, sure. One is the days and times that you would like to do, which is pretty self-sufficient when you whatever you want to do. Two is a general concept of your program outline and what you represent. So whatever your mission is behind your own organization and the sport of rugby itself. And three, the tricky part is what is the financial aspect of it. Some towns do rate per player, some do proportion of a profit share, some do a seasonal rate, and then you say, how would you like this to do it? And then would you be more than happy to have a contract set up? We'll be on file with you guys. We'll send over you want a certificate of insurance on hand. So maybe those 4 things. So maybe overall mission. Two would be the financial gain, and then make sure you have your insurances ready to go for them because
There's a slightly parallel approach that we've taken with the Barbarians, where what we didn't do is establish ourselves separately as a fiscal entity as far as the town was concerned. They actually did all our registrations for us, and so we truly were a town rec team rather than a team who was benefiting from the rec. And so in that respect, they handle all the transactions. We don't see the money, we don't touch the money, we just show up and coach. We tell them exactly as Brad says. We tell them when we're available or when we'd like to coach. We ask for field space, like any other their teams do. but there is that kind of starting point where you're small and emerging, where you don't even need to be that front end to it, or at least our experience has been, you don't have to be that front end to it. It could be a true rec team, which the rec organizes, and you help with the coaches. And at some point, you reach exactly the stage that Brad's describing, where you have critical mass, and at that point, you want to invest in certain things. Excuse me. Maybe rugby posts, which are not cheap. Maybe you want to have particular kits that the town is saying, okay, no, we have a different mindset there, or for whatever reason. And at that point, maybe you want to switch to your own, where you lead fiscally, and then you basically do exactly as Brad says, enter into an agreement with the town, and you pay them as a club on whatever sort of rates or style or standards of payment they're looking for, whether per person, per season, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the Sharks. So the Sharks had a really trying time when we had to leave Whitman, and we weren't particularly organized. We had a really bad we had to leave our field in Whitman after our first practice, so everything was up in the air. So we weren't particularly organized. We didn't have a very established team. We had no financials, nothing like that. So we just did the brute force approach. I just went to all the neighboring towns, went to all the rec departments. Like, what can I do? How much does it cost? What do I need? At this point, we did have the insurance through Myro. So that's the main thing. If you have a team, first thing you do, you register with Myro, and then, you go about finding your fielding. But it was very difficult. I made it sound pretty easy. Just put yourself out there, and you'll sell the product. But to make that initial contact, if rugby, when we were coming around, rugby was unknown. It's very much unknown at the youth level. So there was that people were hesitant. You very much had other teams that didn't want a new team in the town, and I was being turned away by towns that just had grass growing in their fields, and it was really sad. But if you just keep going, keep trying, you'll find something in the general area. I settled at the Y. I found a free field at an awesome place. Is with the product that we have, the sport that we have, it's just a matter of there are reasonable people out there, even if you aren't established with the financials or even organized at all. If you just want to do it, if you have the passion and you push it, there's this youth sports. Everyone wants kids out there playing. So,
Shaggy, were you trying? It sounds like you were trying to find a field space that was that allowed kids to play at a really inexpensive entry point. Does that make sense?
I would have paid anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would. The only thing I was priced out of those Starland, those indoor turf, which was just ridiculously expensive.
Right.
So like a regular seasonal fee, a general fee would have been fine.
And so then, sorry, I'm still following up. Do you have any sense of why certain towns were like, no, we're not interested? Like when because it sounds like you did all this legwork and went in.
Well, it was the politics of getting a new town on their paperwork was a problem in a number of them. It's just they just didn't feel like it, didn't see the value because it was an unknown, and I had the sense that a competing sport that wasn't known to them had no value to some of them, and that's a problem that we're solving now, as in Massachusetts, just by promoting the sport,
Yeah.
So hopefully that barrier kind of goes away. But
well, I want to jump in here a little bit because I am the entire league here in Rhode Island, and I see it as my job to try to establish what the legitimacy is of the sport, what the procedures are to approach different municipalities. The great thing I've always found every time I've looked for a field for somebody or looked for permissions to do anything is that rec departments seem to be, in general, um, they are green light, and there are lots of things that'll keep them from saying yes, but they want to say yes. And I'll contrast that to having to work within the high schools. They seem to be red light. They want to say no, and they'll do everything they can to say no, but you can get them to say yes if you do it right. And I think then that's partly because of how they're funded and how they justify their existence. But more than anything, there's a whole level of first order things that need to be done, like establishing yourself as a 501c3, establishing yourself as a club, as who's the leader, what resume do they have to be this leader, and what is it, and I think Brad said earlier, what's the mission, and to keep that forefront, that this is all about getting kids out to play a new sport, getting any kid out to do any sport is what those municipalities want to see, and I've rarely been turned away from the rec side as much as I've been turned away from the school department side. But there's, they want to know all that there's legitimacy here, that there is, because the sport unfortunately carries with it still some bad cultural connotations from its bad old days in the 70s and 80s, and most people who are um, head of rec departments now are probably of the age where they have that perspective. That's what rugby is, and so we need to. That's where USA Rugby Youth and High School and its organization can help lend some bona fides and some legitimacy. So I've spent an awful lot of time to try to get people to get all the things that'll run you aground lined up before approaching a rec department, so that they have because I know they want to say yes, so that when they do go in, they won't have a blank look on their face when they ask questions about liability insurance and that kind of stuff, or how much are the dues and what's the fee schedule and those types of things. So there's um, you almost have to be entrepreneurial about it. And as a guy who started his own company, I'll tell you, you have to start with your business license. You have to start with business cards and a website and all those things, almost like Jim Rockford used to be in his car. He'd make up his own business cards before he'd walk in and try to talk to somebody. It's almost that level of faking it until you're making it, but putting all the stuff in place, and it's really not faking it. You have it there. You just don't have the whole organization laid out like it'll be when it's mature, because it's not mature. So you just have to try to start, and work under the umbrella of organizations that are there. Because if we were Little League, or if we were CYO basketball, if we were any of these other established organizations, there would not be much of a question about it. And that's what they're used to working with, is those types of organizations like Pop Warner Football, all those national organizations that they know. So it helps to have as many of those legitimacy touch points done before you go in there, so that you can have a better shot at getting the green light that they want to give you.
Awesome. Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's think about the last couple things we want to be able to sort of make people aware of, what you need to have in place, or how you want to be, what you can expect, or how you want to talk to a rec department as we perhaps transition to maybe an athletic director or a school committee. So last thoughts, last things you want to fire off on a rec department, and maybe how that differs. I think Jeff, you did a great job kind of setting up how that may really differ from an athletic director or a school committee. Any last things on rec department?
Yeah, I think I do want to step in and say one more thing, because again, as somebody who represents USA Rugby at the state level, I've got organizations that are shooting from the hip, and they don't have the insurance, they don't have any town recognition. They just try to find a field and they go out and do their thing. And while I admire the enthusiasm and I admire the entrepreneurial spirit, that scares the crap out of me, because I know that there's a lawsuit in there one day if something goes wrong, because we haven't covered ourselves. And so this is particularly for the contact part of the sport, when we get to that level, there are some things we need to protect ourselves with, and that's one of the things that USA Rugby has tried to now be there for. more than they did in the past. And part of the new focus to changing the way USA Rugby is involved is to be more supportive of the growth of the sport and to be there as an umbrella organization that can really help when in the past and sometimes they weren't necessarily as responsive as we needed them to be. I think they've changed their perspective that way a little bit. And I see Alan talking about how the town worked that, but again, as the guy who runs USA Rugby for the for the entire state here, that scares me because naturally people want to just get going and play rugby and go out and do it. And I've got some guys who want to do it that way, and they are doing things that put us at risk all the time. And you were great working with the town. This guy isn't even working with anybody. He's just finding a field that nobody's using and going out and running around and playing rugby, which is, again, I admire the enthusiasm, but it's really coloring outside the lines, and it does incur some risk.
I think there's always exceptions to the rule. I guess the only reason I'm commenting now, Jeff, is not to talk about that individual or that scenario, but to say that as Rentham, we 100% have got the appropriate insurance in place, and we do have all the coverage and all that's in place, and we didn't need to get 501c3, all because we did form a relationship immediately with the town, with the rec department, and they were able to handle all that for us. And so I think for people who are trying to get started, there's more than one path to the answer, is my point. Going rogue is not a path to any answer on any subject, unless going rogue is the outcome.
That's the thing that concerns me, is people who want to go rogue.
Yeah, no.
But I think most of us who are focused on helping kids aren't interested in doing that. We're more interested in trying to do the right thing. And so, much as Shaggy's experience was different to ours, Jeff, your experience has been different, Brad's experience is different. All four of us have gone down legitimate paths to get to a place where we can have a youth team started playing rugby, properly insured, with proper liability protection on sensible fields that are well maintained, and there's no risk, and all doing it within the auspices of whoever needs to be in the auspices of. In your case, same for us, under USA Rugby and USA Youth and High School now.
Yeah, I would just say, obviously the first step to any kind of organized rugby activity, if it's out of the blue and you're in a state with a governing body, would be to contact them, register, get your insurances together. Obviously, you can't just if you got a family, kids and neighbors getting together and just playing rugby, that's one thing. But any kind of team activity, clinic, any kind of organized activity, obviously you have to have legitimate coaches to even try to find a field to play on, to even solicit the kids to play with. Well, step one's always get in contact with people who can help you and organize, because if you're not organized, you're not actually a team. So
Shaggy, I agree, and I started this by saying I see it as my job to help facilitate that, because I would like nothing better for folks to come to me and say, how do we do it, and for me to give them all the tools they need and to work for them. And that's the service I try to offer, including going and talking to the town with them, for them, and showing up as the representative to give them that bona fides. It's all, I think, part of showing the sport as being more legitimate and working against that counterculture kind of perception that people had of us for a long time.
Well, maybe we should transition from the green light that offers 4 different pathways to legitimacy in that we've just heard about, right, in community systems, and talk a little bit more about the high schools and trying to set up a team within one specific high school. Does that sound
absolutely
okay?
Let's go ahead and transition there. I think we were transitioning there anyway. So Kate, do you want to kick us off? Do we want to talk about athletic directors? Do you want to talk about school committees? What are some of the entities that you see as key in being able to start a club that's school based?
Sure. I'll say, so just to preface this, yes, I started a girls program, but there's also a boys program at my school. I certainly benefited from the fact that boys program was set up first. And I will say that, not to steal Jeff's line, which I know is a good point, But it really did start with the kids being interested. So when that program was created, there were a small set of high school guys that wanted to play, and they reached out to a teacher at our school who was playing at the time, and kind of having enough student interest allowed that teacher to go in and sit down with the athletic director and kind of ask, what would it take to start a club? So I think the truth is, having an interested number of students is what actually facilitates having that conversation, from my experience with the athletic director. And the reality in that is that the athletic director has a job, and that is the promotion of the sports that are offered at that school system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the varsity sports that are offered are always going to be their their first priority, as it should be. Those are the sports that are, people are paying fees for. And so realistically, that's going to be where their focus is. And so the conversation with an athletic director kind of has to be around the understanding of how do I potentially get some help in this, in setting up something new, without being from the get-go setting myself up as a competition with what already exists. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, and I think the one thing that I'm loving here is that, if my job was to get more kids in Massachusetts or Rhode Island to play rugby, one venue that I think is just completely underutilized is kind of the route that you just kind of outlined, is go find yourself a high school that has a boys team and start a girls team. Straight up. And with that, I think you were letting us know about athletic directors and school committees. Okay, so how do we talk to these people, and what do we need to know about these folks, in order to be successful?
Well, I think one thing that that really worked in the creation of, especially that first boys program, so that's 2007, I think, when it was set up, is having an adult in place that kind of went in and was an expert in the sport, and had a relationship with the kids, and then also was willing to work with the system as it existed, recognizing that moving forward you could adapt, right? So that means saying hey, what's the worst field that we have? I'll use that field. What's the maybe I can't practice 5 days a week. Maybe I can only practice 2 days a week to start, and next year I'll transition to 3, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
Maybe I can only, is there any way I can play my games on the field? For example, it took a couple of years to have regular season games for that, for our boys team, and even for the girls team. And all of our games started at 7:00 at night. Every other sport that's a varsity program has their games start, 4 p.m. But we had our game start after all the varsity sports were done. And we were grateful, you know what I mean? That's, if you're trying to build a program, you work within the confines of what exists. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think there's that level of kind of going in and just kind of saying okay, in the real world, I will take whatever, I'm going to continue asking for more, but I will make the best use out of whatever I can get each year. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
There's also, sorry.
Oh, no, and I was going to ask. Okay, so if I'm doing that, I need to understand that there's a ladder. There's a pathway. Probably along the pathway, there are different entities within a school system that I need to be able to speak to, or build a relationship. Either approach them for a first time, or build a relationship. Athletic directors, I think we all know they exist. We're pretty clear about what it is that they need and want. And maybe you can let us know a little bit more. Are there other entities that we need to really keep on the map and make sure that we interact with in order to be able to be successful?
Yeah, I think so everything I'm talking about is essentially setting up a club program.
Yep.
And when we transitioned into becoming a varsity team, and we had have a boys and a girls team, we then like that has to go through your superintendent and your school committee have to kind of approve and accept that program. And I think that was a relatively easy yes for Belmont, because we had two existing, we had the boys and the girls program that existed. And one thing that was nice about bringing us on as a varsity program is that, we each had relatively big numbers, and that meant that those were kids that weren't paying fees into the school. Does that make sense? Like they weren't paying the athletic fee. So it became a really big selling point to be like, look, let's make this a varsity sport. And then, like we get to kind of profit off of the existence of these programs.
That's excellent. So it's a little give and take, right? I mean, for those clubs out there that are club status within a school, and you want to make the transition to varsity, understand that is a different world. Understand that you are going to need to be able to speak to those to those levels. And if you want to set up yourself for success, start a girls club, right? Get a girls club going, and by that point, there's so much momentum behind you that it's almost impossible to say no. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the really great thing about rugby, and some people have said it on this podcast before, is that there's not a lot that you need to buy in order to start that. And so like, what could be a no-go would be like trying to get the school system to buy all this new equipment. And we didn't really need that. We got one set of jerseys our first year, and the school paid for our balls, and and then we got more field space, and that was like the perks of it. And slowly through time, we've gotten more jerseys and all these other things. But it's a low entry point for like it's an easy spot for the superintendent and the school committee to say, yes, we will add this to our set of varsity sports and the paid positions that correspond with that, because it's not like it's not the biggest cost of a sport to add.
Makes sense. So take note, clubs out there that are trying to become varsity, or that are recently varsity. Don't go looking for a new Rhino scrum machine. That's not the road to success. That's the
maybe that's not your starting point.
Yeah, you got your eye on the wrong. You're focusing on the wrong thing if that's what you're after. If all you're after is a Rhino, then maybe you need to follow a different path. But to make it to varsity, get a girls club going. And know that who you're going to be talking to. Now, you mentioned that to get the boys club started, you wanted to have a coach that was an expert. Just before we move out of this topic, what's an expert? Is an expert somebody that played senior side for 5 years, 10 years, 3 years? Is an expert somebody who took a coaching clinic? What would you think would be, somebody, maybe don't have to call them an expert, but what would be some of the qualifications that you would want? What are the minimal qualifications you think would be enough to have an athletic director say, okay, yeah, I trust you, and let's move forward with this?
Well, I'm sure that my co-coach would love that I just called him an expert. That's for sure.
Matt's loving it.
But that said,
are you talking about your award-winning co-coach? Generally accepted as an expert by professional rugby teams in the area. Is this who we're talking about? I just want to confirm whether we all think it's the same expert.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. He is an expert.
He is, but it was his first coaching experience. And so I think, like when he started it, he had to say like, there's this governing body called Myro. And so, I'll like we'll be affiliated with that program in the long run, though he had to kind of like learn what that was, but knew it existed. But we all know about, getting level 200 coaching certification through USA Rugby. And that was certainly something that he told the athletic director existed and that he would take it upon himself to take the classes. And there are coaching certification pieces that are necessary for each school. I take a concussion training course and just a couple of different things that I have to do through the high school. And then I think just the amount of experience, if you were starting a program, being experienced in rugby is probably something that an athletic director would be more drawn to, especially if it's a contact sport.
I think there are two classes of things that you go to the administration with. You go to them with things that'll run you aground, and you want to avoid them, like safety. And so you say, hey, there's this 200 thing, and we'll have the insurance, and you have all those things that they'll red light you on. What I found is the biggest green light for the schools is to have kids who say they want to do it. So it's the same for the clubs as it is for the schools. If you have the kids, that's the biggest part of it. And particularly with the administration, if they have kids that want to play the sport and they already ready to go and they're asking for it, that's always been my biggest leverage point, because they don't want to say no to the kids.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, Jeff, you've mentioned that in the past, and that seems to you remind us of that, because that just seems to have been like a real key to some of the success that you saw this past season. So that's key to remember. That's awesome what you were able to accomplish. All right, so Kate, anything else sort of on the school-based sort of entities, or do we want to start moving in the direction of boys and girls clubs and YMCA's, and anybody that's found sort of successes in moving in there, and who do you talk to, who do you approach, what do they do, why are they important? Should we go in that direction now?
Yeah, the one thing I was just anecdotally going to say,
Yeah.
If you were in the market for a Rhino scrum sled, the one joy of working within a single school environment is that they have something called booster clubs, like a athletic booster club, which is just parents that go out and fundraise for all the sports. And so that has been something that we had no access to, that now is like they organized a fan bus for us. It's just, that's the one thing that I had no idea about, but they've certainly turned into a group of parents that are a nice resource for us to even as advocates for things that as coaches we might not be able to advocate for on a town level. So
see, I thought you were just going to direct us to go get Adidas scrum sleds instead and just save money there. But I didn't realize you meant going, coerce parents to give up cash.
I'm just always so impressed with really dedicated parents. That's what I'm saying. But yes, I think you're right. Let's transition to the Boys and Girls Club.
All right. So, anybody have any success or recently been, tied in some way to a YMCA Boys and Girls Clubs?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do a lot. I've tried to start a couple programs at my local YMCA. So the YMCA that took us in when we're floundering for a field, I was trying to give back to them at one point, and I attempted to start. I had a plan to start an adult aerobic rugby program, just to kind of bring more casual gym people into the sport, and they're very receptive to it. What I've found when I've approached the Ys, you just go to the desk. The personnel that's in charge of everything basically changes every 6 months. So it's generally been a new person to talk to for every new thing I've wanted to start there. Every time I've gone in, which has been fine, because just about every time I've talked to that new person, they don't want to change the status quo. So all right, if the last person wants to let you do something, we're going to let you do something. So that's been great for me. So so last time I tried to do something like that, they in order for the Y to bring it into their fold, they offered to hire me for that program. So they hired me to start the recruitment and put the program together. Unfortunately, that didn't really come to pass, that initial push. Um, but that but they've been open lots of different programs. So like this most recent program, this strength and conditioning program that we're running now, um, is essentially one of the instructors of the YMCA was trying to coordinate something for the kids, um, and just reached out to me because like I said, we've been in the area and I've been known to the organization, and so through me they organized the kids to get together into the program. So um, you know so so again, it's just being known to the general organization, and more often than not, I've reached out to a couple of wives, just kind of poking around as I was planning on expanding a few years back, and they've all been very receptive to new programs, and they have hires that are sitting around trying to think of new programs all the time. They're all constantly turning things around, so it's really the perfect breeding ground if you want to just do a pop up program for kids, even an adult touch program. It's like the perfect environment. The only thing is you have to bring the have the time to do the instruction or have someone in place to do that. So that's the only real caveat that I found. But but yeah, they've been super receptive. So
So
yeah.
that's been the only, like you said, caveat. That's the only sort of bogey to keep in the radar is you got to teach them rugby. That's basically it. Because that seems pretty awesome.
That's too much to ask, though.
I
Surely in this
I
day
know,
and age,
yeah.
for a rugby coach to teach someone rugby.
That's true.
Shaggy, does that mean that like you're like I'm thinking about like my town sends out little like community booklets of like classes or things that you can sign up for through the town. Does that mean that like this is the kind of program that you would sign up for through that like a website or a town catalog? That's so cool.
Shaggy's speechless.
Yeah, I
with
know.
the support you've given him. Can you turn that down? Say it again, Kate. Okay, with a little less enthusiasm, so Shaggy can cope with the positive feedback.
Obviously, that's a cliffhanger right there.
All right. So while Shaggy sorts out his mic, so I had some six. Oh, I hear you, Shaggy. You're there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's something that would be distributed through the YMCA catalog, and if you planned it, they would definitely do that. That they have every incentive of monetizing. They can monetize that very easily, and yeah, they have every incentive of doing that. Now, the town catalogs, you'd get in contact with the rec departments from, and again, if as long as you plan something well enough in advance and aligned with the ages that they're targeting for whatever program season they're in. Like for instance, right now, the Marshfield rec catalog's coming out for spring, and they have like one program. So I could very easily put together a rugby program, pitch it to them, and run it. Just go in and pitch it. And of course they'd take it because they have nothing going on. They want to put these programs together. They have people paid to come up with new programs to keep things exciting for the kids. And if you present those, then yeah, it just has to be something fresh, and non-contact, no touch, flag. That's all easy.
So, tying into what Shaggy was talking about, we're talking about YMCA's Boys and Girls Clubs. I had great success with something that never got off the ground. So I'll share with you my experience, although I haven't really been able to do anything with it. I approached, in Providence, there's a rec department, and the rec department sort of governs and facilitates the different the rec centers. I think there's 7, 10, 11 different rec centers. And there's one down the street from us. And what I did is I went to the rec center and I asked them if, we could build something together. Because there was a couple of key things that I wanted to make sure were in place in order for this to be a success. Because I know that I can't run something at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It can only be later in the day, and I know that field space it can be very difficult to get access to. And also, I was coaching with the Barbarians, so the one thing that I figured is I'd approach an individual rec center where they have basketball in the winter and ask them if they wanted to have rugby. It would be indoors, it would be in the middle of winter. That way, I would be able to borrow equipment from any of the many teams. There's college sides, there's senior sides here that I'm associated with it. So being able to get equipment, I wouldn't have to buy any of it. So I came to them and I said, listen, I have a plan here. If you want to do something in the middle of winter, I'll have all the equipment. I will also have the players that would be playing, but it's off season, so I'll have the coaches to be able to bring in. And if we could please schedule this, between like 6 or 7 o'clock or 6 or 8 o'clock. And I think that really hit all the spots that they were after. They needed they were hungry for new activities for the kids. They mentioned that 3 or 4 years ago they had lacrosse, and that was great success. It was fantastic because it was something new, but it just it didn't come back. But I found a lot of success if I came with them with a plan for you don't have to give any equipment, you don't have to have any coaches. I'll bring it in. All I need is just kids that would be interested. And what I didn't realize is that these kids they sign up with a rec center, and they go there, and the directors schedule activities, and sometimes a lot of times schedule the activities for the kids, like you're going to be going to this day, you're going to be going there that day. So he had a population of kids that he kind of owned the schedules for. So they were very excited to have this happen. I was very excited because it hit all the things that I needed. It was after work. It was during the winter, so it wasn't going to compete with responsibilities that I had to the Barbarians. It was not going to be associated in any way with USA Rugby. It was not going to be any sipping. They were going to have their own insurance. I was hoping that over time it would build momentum up in players so that perhaps in a couple of years we could spill to outdoors or spin off a USA Rugby community-based club that I could then go on the road and compete against all you lovely folks. So I had a lot of success there, and if I just had I had a plan, I had it all laid out in a PDF, but I think just them seeing that I had some bullets and that I knew what I was talking about, they were completely open to being able to schedule. And then COVID, happened and it ruined everything. But Shaggy, like you, they were very open to have something happen. I didn't have to pay anything. I didn't have to pay for the space. I think if I had if I set it up slightly different, I would have to pay for the space to be able to use that space. But because I was doing it for their kids, not for my club, they
Yeah.
were completely open to that. Right, Shaggy?
Yeah, that's the main thing. So the main sticker point is it can't be like a club activity. It has the way that things seem to be the least resistance seems to be incorporating in whatever the organization's already implementing. Like so, for example, the Boys and Girls Club. One a high school student had we put together a program for the Boys and Girls Club rugby program, and it was incredible. It was incredible. It was just a league. You had about like 4 teams, and they just they practice and play each other every week. But it couldn't come out and join us in Myro games. We snuck them out for one, but don't tell anyone. But yeah, that's the real sticking point. But it's in used as a means to develop that critical mass and develop those group of players that can transition. Um, are and then then it's all good.
Yeah, and that was one
Definitely
key
worth it.
thing. Yeah, that was one key thing to point out is if you're going to approach, a boys and girls club, a rec center, you have to make it very clear that you're not saying I'm bringing this for my rugby team. It's no, I'm bringing rugby to your center. And they had no, in fact, they liked the fact that there were some children in the area that knew how to play rugby, that were part of the barbarians, and my children, and I could say to them, hey, listen, not only will I set up this rugby program for you guys, or this rugby activity for you guys, but I'm going to bring some people in who will sign up to be in your rec center. So they can be a part of this. So I'm bringing this to you, and I'm bringing some children into it, and they were very psyched about it. They were very, very happy. Now you need to check with your rec, however it is that you're doing it, your the specific center you're doing it with might have stipulations about how the kids that are going to be associated with it have to live in that city. I don't know if they do it or don't. Double check to see, if they have some sort of stipulation about who can be, in that rec center. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely want to, play the home field advantage with whoever you're pitching things to, if possible.
Exactly, and I know that probably gets stuck in Jeff in your craw, or not. But this was a situation where I was setting it up. Setting up this hopefully this feeder of kids that's associated with a town, and maybe at some point would then bubble up and create a team that would join RI Rugby. So you know what, I was doing it based on the things that I know that I could do, and I know from your perspective it would be great if it was a club that was part of II Rugby. Is that I can only assume.
Well, no, particularly at the flag level. I mean, you need to be entrepreneurial at the state it's in Rhode Island anyway. So anything, all of the above right now. We just need to get to that point where it is feeding into clubs, and we do have that umbrella. But anybody who wants to champion it now, I am all for.
All right, so I think we've explored athletic directors, rec departments, school committees. That was really neat. I didn't think about the fact that if you want to start a club quickly, go to a school that already has a boys team and start a girls team. We talked about parks, recreations, YMCA, boys and girls clubs. Anybody else? Any other entities out there that anybody has worked with, or that we want to keep on the radar, or make people aware of? I think we've pretty much exhausted the list, haven't we? All right, if that
Probably. It probably narrows down to, do they have grass? And do I need to bring my own insurance?
Yeah, exactly. That what's funny, that's absolutely right. As long as the kids are there, particularly if they already have kids, then that would be that would be ideal. All right. Any last things? But I think we've pretty much gotten to the bottom of this one. Any last things before perhaps we call it a day? We're good.
I think so.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us from this podcast. We're gonna have join us every 2 weeks. We'll let you know what the topic is, and